Alright guys, today's Firestarter is going to go over 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. So that's 6 Firestarters in one video. A lot of these are going to be the very similar concepts. The first couple are going to start with these formulas right here, where you're going to be trying to figure out if it's a triangle, a square, a rectangle, parallelogram, trapezoid, or circle. Remember, if you see the P, right, that's for perimeter. Circumference is like the perimeter, but with a circle. Remember, so circumference is around the circle. Circumference or perimeter is around the shape. All right. Area is the stuff on the inside. So area is what you're going to have the coverage on the inside of our circle. All right. Or the inside of our square or rectangle. That's always measured in square units. So the perimeter and circumference is normal units. The area is always square units, or units squared is how you're going to write at the end. Then we're going to have three-dimensional shapes. Over on the other one, we have three-dimensional shapes. We have prism, regular pyramid, cylinder, cone, sphere. All those we're going to use. All right. If you're using surface area, that's like wrapping paper. That's how much is going to go around the outside of it. That's how much coverage on the outside. Volume is how much you could fill it, how much you can hold, like if you're like filling up a cup or something like that. So that's what we're going to go with. If you have any questions, please let me know, private comment or something. And we're going to go through and use these 2 pages is going to be all we need to figure out all of these Firestarters. Alright, so for 1 and 2, we are going to find the missing measurement. Look, they have given us the area. So look, I know the area. So the area formula for a trapezoid, area, is equal to 1/2 base 1 plus base 2. Basically, that's the average of the 2 bases times your height. Now, I write 1/2 times b1 plus b2 in parentheses because I see that usually eliminates some of the calculator mistakes. Some of you guys might see b1 plus b2 all over h. That's fine as well. Whichever formula you like to use is totally fine with me. The only reason I use the 1/2 again is a lot of times when you have b1 plus b2 all over h, you guys or all over 2, you guys forget to do the top first, so the 1/2 kind of makes that less likely. All right. So I'm going to find different stuff. So this is the area. So the area I put in as 754. So I'm just plugging in what I know, and then I'm going to probably use some Algebra 1 skills to figure out the rest. Now, the height is 26, so I'm going to put 26 right there. 1/2 has to stay. And then it depends on what you want to call. We'll call this one B1. So the only thing I don't know is B2. So I don't know B2. So instead of question mark, I'm just going to put B2, or you can even put X. Some people are putting X. That's fine too. Right? Now look, I have everything except one letter. That means I can use PEMDAS backwards, or I can solve using Algebra 1 solving skills. So I'm going to do a little bit of rewriting. So notice I'm going to put the 26 right next to the 1/2. And 1/2 of 26 is 13. So this right here turns into 13. I'm going to leave 19.1 plus X right here. It's going to be equal to 754. So look, I'm just solving a multi-step equation. I call it PEMDAS in reverse. If you need help with that, let me know. This is just Algebra 1 review now. So remember, I have to get rid of this. This 13 is multiplying, so I'm going to get rid of multiplication by division. I know some people would distribute there, but I just think that makes a little bit more work than we want to have. So all I'm going to do right now is 754 divided by 13. I don't care if it's a decimal or not. It is 58, but it works out nicely. So now I have 58. So we went up here. Equals 19.1 plus X. Now to get rid of the 19.1, I have to subtract it because I want this to leave on the right side. If I do it on the right side, I have to do it on the left side. That's what you learned in Algebra 1. So I do 58 minus 19.1. So my base, my X, is equal to 38.9 feet. And really that's B2. So really B2 equals 38.9 feet. All right, and that's it for number 1. Number 2, the exact same concept. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write my area formula. Area equals 1/2 the first base, base 1, plus the second base, all times h. So my area is 174.5, so I put 174.5 right there, equals 1/2. Now the first base, we'll say, is 6.6. The second base is 22. And we don't know the height, so we'll just put h. You can put x if you want to put x. I just like leaving it as h. Now I'm just going to do a little bit of simplifying first, so I'm not even solving yet. I'm just going to do 6.6 times 22 to get 28.6. Now I'm going to multiply 1/2 and 28.6 together, so I'm going to get 174.5 equals 14.3 times h. Now remember, if it's a number in front of the letter, it means it's multiplication. And I tell you guys, to get rid of multiplication, you divide by that number on both sides. That's how it cancels out on the right side. So I'm left with h equals, I just do in my calculator, 174.5 divided by 14.3. I'm left with 12.2. And because I rounded, right? So because I rounded, I'm going to make that into a, into an approximate symbol. That's just me being a little bit picky. It's not like the end of the world if you forget it, but really it is an approximate symbol because I did round. So it's 12.2, and this is inches. So don't forget your labels. That's good for that's Firestarter 9. All right, Firestarter 10 is going to be using Pythagorean's theorem. So both of these will be using a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Now on your area and perimeter worksheet, which has some very similar problems, if you haven't done that, these Firestarters can help with a lot of that. You have to find the side length in order to find the area and the perimeter. So on a problem like number 2, you'd have to do more work than what I'm going to do because that's what the worksheet says. But number 1, so remember, the first thing you should always do is you should find C, right? Because that's the one that matters. C is always across from the 90-degree angle. So this is C. All right. So I know A, and it doesn't matter if I call this one A or I call the other one A. So these are A, one's A and one's B. We'll call this one A, this one B. But it really doesn't matter. I could switch it. It's not going to change anything. So I have 11 squared plus, in parentheses, square root of 17 squared equals x squared. All right. Now 11 squared is 121. Square root of 17 squared, if you put in your calculator, it's just 17 because technically the little check mark and the 2 cancel each other out. So it's just 17. Now I'm going to write the variable on the left just because I like it that way. And I get 138. Now all I have to do to figure out what x is I square root both sides. That's what makes the little 2 go away if you didn't learn that in Algebra 1. So I just spin my calculator, second square root. 138 is 11 point, now remember I'm going to say x. X is about 11.7 feet. If you do 2 decimals, that's fine. All right, 11.75. But notice I use the approximate symbol. All right. So 2 is a little bit different. So 2, I'm going to focus on this triangle first. Alright, so I'm going to do this twice. So now I know that this is C. I'm going to say this is, it doesn't matter to me, like I said, you can call this A, you can call this B, we'll say this is B, we don't know that one. So I have A squared, which is 5.2 squared, plus B squared, you could put an X there if you want, equals 9 squared. Alright, so look, I'm going to find this guy first. Then I'm going to find this guy. So I'm finding this side length first. So I can use that to get the next one. There is some, if you got some pretty good geometry knowledge, you might actually have to not do any of this for a very specific reason. But we're going to do it this way. So I do 5.2 squared in my calculator, it gives me 27.04, so I just write 27.04 plus b squared equals 81. Now I'm going to minus 27.04 from both sides. So minus 27.04. So I do 81 minus 27.04. So I end up with b squared equals 53.96. Now I'm going to square root both sides. So I square root 53.96. So remember, the square root is what makes this little 2 go away, and if I do it to one side, I have to do the other way. So that's how I end up with b equals, and it's not equals because I'm going to round. So it's actually approximately, is about, we'll say 7.35. And I'm going to use, they didn't give me a unit length, so we'll just say units. Alright. So, this right here, so our new height, I'm going to kind of erase the triangle now, so you don't get confused. So now I'm going to relook at this triangle, and I'm going to only focus on the right half of the triangle. So I really don't know that, if I knew that this big gigantic triangle was the big triangle was a right triangle, I could use this as A, B, and C, but I don't. So because I don't know that this part's 90, right, I actually have to do it as two separate triangles. So now I'm going to look on this triangle right here. So now I'm doing this triangle right here. Right, I'm looking at that triangle, and I'm going to figure out, and what I found out is that this is 7.35. So now I don't know this one. So I'm going to call this one, so this is in part 2. So I'm going to call this one A. So I have A squared plus, this is going to be my B, so I'm going to put 7.35 squared equals 81. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped a step. Equals 9 squared. So I have A squared plus, I do 7.35 squared. Now I left my previous answer, so I got it something a little bit different. But we'll do 7.35 squared. I end up with about 54. We'll say 54. If you want to put 0.225, that's fine. Equals 81. I minus 54 from both sides. So I end up with A squared equals 26.9775. Now I square root both sides, just like we did before, because that's how I find out. That's how I get rid of little 2. So second square root 26.9775. Mine might be a little bit different because I did not round until the end. So I get A is about 5.2. So that's about 5.2. You could have done something with side angle or with congruent triangles to figure that one out. If you wanted to, you could have done something with, but beyond that's pretty good. Alright, so once again we're doing another find the missing measurement for Firestarter 11. The keyword is water bottle. The keyword is water bottle. The first one is going to be using our a squared plus b squared equals c squared. The second one is going to be using the area. Now, I don't know that this is a square yet. It's very likely that it is a square, but I have no proof because I don't know that this and this are the same. We might be able to, at the end, prove it's a square, but for right now, the only thing we know is that it's a rectangle. So I have to use the area is equal to length times width. All right, and this is the length, and we don't know the width. All right, so going back to the first one. Now, once again, it's going to be very similar to Firestarter 10, where I'm going to focus on this triangle first, because I don't know if the whole thing's a right triangle. If I knew the whole thing was a right triangle, that would change my setup. Remember, this is going to be C. We can call this one A, and we'll call this one B. So I'm only using the blue triangle. So I'm going to say 8 squared plus B squared, we don't know that, equals 14 squared, because that's C. Now, 8 squared is 64. I don't know what b squared is. I know 14 squared is 196. So now I'm going to take 64 from both sides. So I do 196 minus 64. I end up with 132. So I have b squared equals 132. Remember, I want to get the letter by itself, and then I want to square root both sides, because that's going to help me figure out, it's going to get rid of that little 2. So remember, we're going to round to the nearest tenth. So I have b is approximately 11.5. And we'll say units, because I don't want to forget to write units, but they didn't give us a unit to write down. Right? So I know the blue triangle. Right, we know that one now. So we know that this is now 11.5. Now I want to find this triangle. So we don't know, we'll call this A, we'll call this B, and we'll call that C. So I'm going to say A squared, we don't know it, plus 11.5 squared equals 18 squared. I rewrote it because it looked really bad and my computer was being kind of slow. So a squared plus 11.5 squared equals 18 squared. So I have to know 18 squared. I know that is 324. I don't know what a squared is. I know 11.5 squared. I'm going to put in my calculator. 11.5 squared. It's 132.25. Right? I'm just double checking 18 squared. I was correct. Now I want to get rid of 132.25. And the reason I didn't round, guys, is because it was only 2 decimal places. You could have rounded. I wouldn't take off if you round it. But I only round if I absolutely have to keep my answer. And I try to limit my rounding till the end to keep my answer more accurate. But I wouldn't take off necessarily if you rounded there. So I get a squared is 191.75. So like I didn't round that one to 0.8 because even though it says nearest tenth, it's because it's 2 decimal places. It's an exact answer. I'd always take an exact answer if possible. So now I'm going to do square root of 191.75 because I have to square root both sides. Remember, that's how we get rid of the little 2. So 191.75. That means my length for A is about 13.8, or you could say 13.85 if you really want to do 2 decimal places. But look, I just write units. And that's it. Alright, 2. Area is equal to length times width. Now notice, guys, one thing I have not mentioned in this video so far is look at all the work I am showing. Alright, I need to see your work. I care very little about your answers. I like your answers. I hope they're all correct. But I care extensively more about how you get those answers. So show me as much work as you possibly can so you can continue to get credit. Alright, so the area for number 1 is length times width. So we know that the area is 2,332.9. So I'm going to put 2,332.9 equals, well, the length is 48.3. and I don't know the width, so we'll say times W. Now this one's pretty easy because the only thing we got to do to get rid of the 48.3 is divide. So all I do is I take 2,332.9 and I divide by 48.3. I end up with about, so my width is equal to 48, and we'll say about, I'm going to say approximately, because I am rounding. .3 centimeters. Now we can say it's a square. So I proved that it's essentially a square. I couldn't, if you put 48.3 with no work just because you said it was a square, you're wrong. You assumed it was a square, you just happened to guess right. Right? Doesn't mean it is a square. It is now that we've proven it. Firestarter 12, exact same concept. All right? The first one is this. I'm going to use my area formula. I'm going to say area is equal to 1/2 base times height. Once again, you might see base times height over 2. I like to use the fraction because it seems to keep you guys from making calculator mistakes. Whichever, it's personal preference. 2 is going to use a squared plus b squared equals c squared 2 different times for both triangles. All right, the left triangle, right triangle. We do not know if the whole triangle is a right triangle, so we can't just use it once. So what I'm going to do for number 1, I'm going to put area equals 1/2 base times height. This is the area, so I put 521.5 equals 1/2. The base is always perpendicular, so this is the base. So at 1/2, 29.3 times my height. We don't know the height, so we're just going to put an H there. So in my calculator, I'm going to do 1/2, 29.3 first. I end up with 14.65. So I have 521 equals 14.65 H. Now to get rid of the 14.65, I divide by 14.65 on both sides, and that's going to give me the H. So basically, guys, we're using a geometry formula and then algebra 1 skills to solve. That's all that this section has been about the last couple of fire starters. So I end up with 35.6. So we're going to say about. Now that is centimeters. Notice they want it in millimeters. So to actually put it in correctly, I do have to move the decimal place over 1. So my H is actually going to be 356 millimeters. So they did try and trick you by mixing up measurements and units and labels. Alright, I'm going to start off with the left triangle. So I'm starting off with this blue triangle here. We'll say this is A. We'll say this is B. We'll say this is C. Remember, C is always across from 90. C is always the longest. C is always the hypotenuse, which is the longest side. So I'm going to say A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So I don't know A, so it's A squared. I know B is 6 squared. I know C is 7 squared. So I end up with A squared plus 36 equals 49. I'm going to minus 36 from both sides. Remember, I want A by itself. It's just algebra 1 solving. I get A squared equals 13. Now I'm going to square root both sides because that's how I get rid of the little. And some people will have you leave it as the square root of 13. I told you you could. Some people will leave it like that. I told you you could write it. You could give me a decimal, so you just put it in your calculator. Square root of 13 is 3.6. We'll say about. Remember, it's approximate. We'll say 3.6 units. So this right here becomes 3.6. Now, I'm going to do the second triangle. And luckily I didn't even need to know anything from there. So this B, we already know B. So B is going to stay the same. I'm going to make this one A now. I'm going to make that C. So I'm going to say A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Remember, it's Pythagorean's theorem. It only works with right triangles. So A, we don't know. B is going to be 6 again. But this time, C is going to be 9. So I have A squared plus 36 equals 81. Now I do 81 minus 36. I end up with 45. So I square root both sides. So A is equal to, you could break that down into 3 radical 5. Well, I'm not going to go over how to break down radicals today. But most of us are probably going to just put in your calculator and you're going to give me a decimal. So it's about 6.7. So now you could find the area if I told you to, because you have the base now, because this is the base. Alright, so there's boom and boom. And that's it for 12. Alright, Firestarter 13 is introducing 3-dimensional shapes and solids. Alright, so determine whether a solid is a polyhedron. Remember, we determine things whether a polygon if they failed some criteria. Same thing with the polyhedron. Polyhedron has to have, basically it has to be a shape with edges, identifiable edges, bases, faces, and vertices. So like, for example, anything that's rounded cannot be a polyhedron. So cylinder, cone, sphere, they are not polyhedrons. I did put this little hint page from earlier. So remember, we want to identify the bases, faces, and edges, and vertices. So, 1, it is a polyhedron. So it is a polyhedron. Alright. It is a 3-dimensional solid with connected, identifiable edges, bases, faces, vertices, etc. Alright. The base is this purple rectangle. Right? Now, a pyramid has one base connected to one point. So, this is definitely a pyramid, and and I see that all 4 sides are congruent on the bottom. Right? You name a pyramid because of the one point at top. The base connects to one vertice up top. And the first name of it is always based on the base shape. So if that purple base was a rectangle, it would be a rectangular pyramid. If it was a pentagon, it'd be a pentagonal pyramid. If it had 6 sides, it'd be a hexagonal pyramid. So we get to say it's a square pyramid because the bottom is a square. So the purple square is the base. Alright. Now, this is a face. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4 red triangles that are faces. So that's a triangle, that's a face. This is a triangle, that's a face. This is a triangle, that's a face. This is a triangle, that's a face. So any flat surface that is not a base is a face. So if it's not a base and it's flat, it's a face. All right? The edges are all these lines. All these lines. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The 8 line segments are the edges, and the vertices are the purple points. 5 purple points. Those are vertices. Alright. So number 2 is actually probably the hardest of all these. And it's not that it's hard, because look, it's definitely a prism. Right? Notice a prism is two bases connected by rectangles. That's easy to see. The reason that this one's difficult, and it's definitely a rectangular prism, because it's all rectangles. All right. A prism is always a prism because it's two bases connected by rectangles. The rectangular part is named for the bases. The bases name it. So what's interesting here is that this could be considered a base because it's sitting there. So these two red rectangles could be the bases. They also could be faces only in a rectangular prism. Right? If this was any other type of prism, it could not change, and I'll explain that more in class. Right? So the other four rectangles, those are going to be the faces. Remember, there's nothing rounded there, so it's obviously a polyhedron, right? And then all the edges are the segments, and then it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 vertices. All right, that's where the segments meet. So 3 is not a polyhedron because of the circle. It's a cylinder. It does have two bases. It has two circle bases. Right, there's a base, there's a base. But there are no edges, there's no faces, there's no vertices. Right? So it's not a polyhedron. 4 is a cone. It has one circular base, and it does have one vertex. Right? That's it. That's it for this Firestarter. All right, so find the volume and the surface area. Now we need to know the height here. I didn't actually give you the height, so we need to know that height. Now you could have found out the height using Pythagorean's theorem if you wanted to, but I told you guys in class that the height for this pyramid, now this is a square pyramid, so that means it's a regular shape on bottom. Right? So that means I'm going to be using these formulas. Right? So the height, this is the height. This is called slant length. That's slant height. Right? That's the height on the edge. So to find we're going to start with volume, or we'll start with surface area. Surface area is the wrapping paper, right? And I have a formula right here for surface area right here. So I'm going to say, so surface area equals 1/2 the perimeter of the base times the slant height plus the area of the base. So if you're not sure, guys, I'm getting, look, perimeter of the base. It says it right here. Big B, area of the base. Remember, I told you it was really important to understand that big letters mean something different than little letters. So we do have to understand that's a big B, and that's why it means that. So the bottom is a square. So if I took out this piece right here, right? If I took out this square right here from like last section, the perimeter of the square is 44. So I know that's 44. The area of it is length times width is 121, or side squared. So I don't know surface area yet. I know the 1/2 is there. I know the slant length is 13.2. Let me give myself some more room. So remember, the area of the base is 121. So now look, I'm just going to plug this all into my calculator. I'm going to say 1/2 44 times 13.2 plus 121. And if you're using one of my calculators, you can plug it in exactly the way it looks. That's why I use that fraction instead of something divided by 2, which you might see. So I have a 411.4. Now you have to remember that surface area is coverage. Surface area is always square units, so it's square feet. Now volume, that's different. So I'm going to use the volume formula. All right, so the volume formula is 1/3 the area of the base, so that's why it's a big B, times the height. And now remember, height is different than slant height. So I'm going to use the purple 12 instead of the 13.2. So I'm going to say volume equals 1/3. Remember, base, the area of the base is 121. We already found that. That's because the square at bottom. And the height is 12. So I'm just going to do 1ABC3 in my calculator if you're using one of mine, times 121 times 12 is 484. So my volume is 484, and it's going to be cubic feet, right? Because they're little cubes. They're counting how many little cubes can fit in there. So remember, surface area is always square units. Cubic units are always volume. All right. And that's it for number 1. Number 2 is a prism. All right, so I'm going to use the prism formulas. Now, with the prism, you have to identify what is the base. There are 2 of them. All right, so with a rectangular prism, I could pick any rectangle to be the base. I just have to make sure I understand that the height is not part of that. So if I use this guy as the base, 2 and 7 cannot be the height. You've also might have been told length times width times height for volume of a rectangular prism. That is totally fine. You can use that. All right. But so I am saying that the base is this rectangle right here. So my perimeter, so my surface area says the perimeter of the base. So this perimeter. So the red rectangle looks like this. So this is the base. So it is 7 by 2, which means it's 7 here and it's 2 there. So the perimeter of it would be 14 plus 4. So the perimeter of the base would be 18. Now, if I use these 2 numbers for base, then that means this has to be the height. All right? So my height is going to be 10. Now, it says plus 2 times the area of the base. So 2 times 7 is 14. So I have surface area is equal to 180 plus 28. So my surface area is equal to 208. Now remember, it is kilometers, so it is square kilometers. All right. Volume, much easier. Now you could do, like I said, you could do length times width times height. That's what you've been told before. That's totally fine. But I'm just going to do the area of the base. That's why it's a big B, times the height. Well, the area of the base is length times width, which is 2 times 7, which is 14. And the height is 10. So my volume is going to be equal to 140. And this time it is cubic kilometers. Last one we're going to do, and then we're finally done, is we're going to talk about a cylinder. So the cylinder says find the radius. All you need is the radius and the height. So remember, this is a diameter. So the radius, so 24 is a diameter. So the R is always half of that, so R is 12 yards. All right. So to find the surface area, we just plug it in. Surface area is equal to 2 pi. Remember, the R is 12. This is the height because it's not part of the base. So you could, there are 2 ways to write this answer. You could do 2 times 12 times 9, 2 times 12 times 9 is 216 pi, and you could just write your answer right there. 216 pi square yards. Some people like it in terms of pi because it's exact, but for us, I think we're going to multiply by pi. We're just going to put 216 pi in our calculator. So my surface area is going to equal to 678 point, we'll say 58 square yards. Either answer is acceptable. It's a really personal preference. Most of us are going to give me the decimal approximation, which is fine. Volume. So remember, volume is pi r squared times the height. So my volume is equal to pi. This time r is 12. Doesn't change, right? And h is still 9. So I'm going to have 12 squared, which is 144, times 9. It's going to turn into, so my volume is 1,296 pi. Now, if you're going to end here, you got to put square yard or cubic yards, because it's how much it can hold. It's how much little tiny cubes, like ice cubes almost, could fit inside of it. Now, I'm going to do 1296 times pi. I'm going to end up with 4,071.5. So my volume is equal to 4,071.5 cubic yards. And that's it. And that finishes this video. I know it was long, guys, but it gave us a whole bunch of answers. So you needed these answers.